After my heart operation, I sent a message in our family group chat asking, "Who is going to come get me from the hospital?" My son Ryan replied almost immediately, "Just take a cab. I am in the middle of watching a show." My wife Linda followed that with, "Why not stay there another month? The house is so peaceful without you around." That same evening, when my face appeared on the local news, their 67 frantic calls rang my phone nonstop. I did not answer a single one. What I chose to do after that shifted everything in my life. Pain slammed into me like a lightning strike, sharp and violent, as if my chest were being torn apart from the inside. I sucked in a ragged breath and my eyes snapped open, only to be assaulted by blinding white light that made my head throb. I had no idea where I was. The room spun in nauseating circles, making my stomach lurch. Slowly, shapes came into focus. Smooth white walls, monitors chirping in steady mechanical rhythms, clear tubes running out of my arms like artificial vines. I tried to push myself upright, but my body rebelled instantly. Every muscle screamed. Something was very wrong. My chest felt as if it had been pried open with brute force. Beneath the thin hospital gown, I could feel thick layers of bandages wrapped tightly around my torso. "Mr. Harris, you are awake." A woman in a white coat stepped into my field of vision. She had calm, kind eyes behind thin metal-framed glasses. "I am Dr. Reynolds, your cardiologist," she said gently. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got run over by a truck," I rasped. My voice barely worked, my throat raw and burning. "What happened to me?" She glanced at the monitor beside my bed, studying numbers that meant nothing to me. Her expression stayed steady and professional. "You underwent emergency heart surgery 2 days ago," she explained. "A triple bypass. Your heart stopped for 47 seconds during the procedure." 47 seconds. The number echoed inside my head, heavy and unreal. "So, was I dead?" "Clinically, yes," she said evenly, "but we brought you back." She pressed her fingers to my wrist, silently counting my pulse. "You are going to recover, Mr. Harris." "The surgery went well. You will need about 2 weeks here in the hospital, followed by a slow return to normal activity." 2 weeks, I repeated. I looked around the room again. Through a narrow window, I could see a gloomy skyline of Kansas City under thick winter clouds. It was early February. There were no flowers, no cards, nothing on the table to suggest anyone had visited or even asked about me. A nurse hurried in, checking the intravenous line attached to my arm. She smiled warmly as she adjusted the drip with practiced hands. "I am Melissa," she said. "I will be your nurse today. Are you in pain right now?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. She made a note and adjusted the medication. Within minutes, the sharpness dulled, the pain easing into something more tolerable. Dr. Reynolds pulled a chair closer. "I need to ask you a few questions to be sure everything is functioning properly. Can you tell me what year it is?" 2026. "And the month?" "February." Saying it felt strange, like the word carried weight. "Good," she said. "Now squeeze my hands as hard as you can." I did my best. My grip felt weak and unsteady, but she nodded with approval. "Motor function looks fine. Memory appears intact," she said, typing notes into her tablet. "For the next few days, the focus will be pain control and light movement. We will have you walking short distances soon." When she left, the room fell quiet, except for the endless beeping of machines. I carefully reached for the small table beside the bed and found my phone. The screen lit up with notifications from news apps, pharmacy reminders, and junk emails. I scrolled, searching for missed calls or messages from Linda or Ryan. There were none. I opened the family chat. The last message was from 3 weeks earlier, Linda complaining that the grocery store was out of her favorite yogurt. Before that, Ryan had asked if I could loan him money to fix his car. There was nothing about my surgery, no concern, no check-in, not a single word. My hand shook as I set the phone back down and stared at the patterned ceiling tiles above me. I had been gone for 47 seconds, technically dead, and no one in my family had noticed. Not one call, not one message. I closed my eyes and let the sterile silence of the hospital room settle around me. The sharp smell of disinfectant pulled me backward into memories I had been trying to ignore. It started in the summer of 2021. I was in the backyard of our suburban home in Overland Park, planting tomato seedlings under the blazing sun. A sudden tightness wrapped around my chest, like a strap being pulled too tight. I grabbed the fence and waited for it to pass, telling myself it was just the heat. "Harold, you are being dramatic again," Linda called from the patio, holding a glass of iced tea. "Come inside before you give yourself a stroke." I laughed it off. 67 years old and still stubbornly convinced I was tough. I told myself I just needed water and rest. But the episodes did not stop. By the following year, climbing the stairs to our bedroom felt like scaling a mountain. I would stop halfway, gripping the railing, while my heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to break free. Linda would already be in bed, watching her nightly programs. "You are getting old," she would say without looking away from the screen. "Maybe stop overdoing it on the weekends." I never told her about the metallic taste in my mouth during the worst spells, or how the room tilted when I stood too fast. She was busy enough with her book club meetings and charity luncheons. Ryan was no better. When I mentioned how exhausted I felt all the time, he shrugged from his spot on the couch. "Maybe see a doctor, Dad," he said. "Actually, that sounds expensive. Try vitamins first." At 29 years old and still living in our basement, he seemed more worried about medical bills, cutting into what he assumed would someday be his inheritance, than about whether I would live long enough to spend it. The first truly frightening episode happened in our kitchen on a Tuesday morning in March of 2023. I was standing at the counter, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing, when a brutal force slammed into my chest. It felt like a sledgehammer striking bone. My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the counter as coffee grounds scattered across the floor, then slid down onto the cold linoleum. "Linda!" I tried to call out, but my voice barely traveled past the doorway. It came out thin and weak, more breath than sound. She found me nearly 10 minutes later, still sitting on the floor, struggling to pull air into my lungs in short, shallow gasps. "Oh my God, Harold," she said. "Did you fall?" She helped me up into a chair, but her attention was already drifting. She glanced at the clock on the microwave. "I have my hair appointment in an hour," she said. "Do you think you can drive yourself to the doctor?" I did not go to the doctor. I drove myself straight to the emergency room. The young physician who examined me had steady hands and eyes that did not hide their concern. "Mr. Harris," he said carefully, "you have had a mild heart attack. We need to run additional tests immediately." Those tests confirmed what I had suspected for years but never wanted to admit. The chest pain was not stress. It was not age. My arteries were narrowing, hardening, clogging like old plumbing filled with rust. In November of that same year, another doctor sat across from me and spoke plainly. "Without surgery, you have 6 months," he said, "maybe less. With a triple bypass, you could have 10 good years." I drove home afterward in my aging pickup truck, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. 10 good years. The question that haunted me the entire drive was whether I wanted to spend those years with people who barely noticed I was dying. The sound of my hospital room door opening pulled me back to the present. Nurse Melissa leaned inside, offering her familiar, gentle smile. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Harris?" she asked. "Do you need anything for pain?" I glanced at my phone again. Still no messages, still nothing from Linda or Ryan. "I am just thinking," I said. She nodded, as if she understood more than I had said. "Big surgeries give people time to think," she replied softly. "Sometimes that is helpful. Sometimes it is hard." After she left, I stared at the family group chat icon on my phone. My finger hovered over it. 2 weeks had passed since my surgery, 2 full weeks of silence. Maybe they did not know. Maybe the hospital failed to notify them. Maybe 45 years of marriage and raising a son still meant something after all. The morning of January 29th arrived bright and cold beyond my hospital window. Discharge day. I packed my few belongings into an old duffel bag Linda had given me years earlier for fishing trips. I folded everything neatly. My reading glasses, the paperback novel I never managed to open, the pajamas that still carried a faint scent of home. My chest felt stronger. The stitches tugged when I moved, but the crushing pressure was gone, replaced by a dull ache I could manage. Dr. Reynolds signed my discharge paperwork with a reassuring smile. "You are lucky to be alive," she told me during her final exam. "Use this second chance wisely." I checked my phone again. Nothing. No message. No call. 2 weeks of complete silence while I fought my way back from the edge of death. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they thought I was too weak for visitors. Maybe they were planning something special. I had always been the one who handled emergencies, driving Linda to her appendectomy, sitting all night with Ryan when he broke his arm as a child. Maybe they just did not know how to show up when I was the one in the bed. I typed a message into the family group chat. "Hello? I am being discharged today and feeling much better. I cannot wait to see you." I deleted it. Too emotional, too exposed. I tried again. "The hospital is releasing me today. Looking forward to coming home." Delete. On the third try, I typed, "The doctor says I can come home today. I would love to see everyone." That felt balanced, hopeful, not desperate. I hit send and placed the phone on the bed beside my packed bag. The response came almost immediately. Ryan's name appeared first. "Call a taxi. I am watching television." I read it 3 times, unable to process it. 47 seconds without a heartbeat, 2 weeks in recovery, and my son could not be bothered to stand up from the couch. But Linda would be different. She had to be. 45 years together meant something. Her message appeared beneath his. "Stay another month in the hospital. It is so nice without you." The phone slipped from my hand and landed on the white blanket. The words glowed on the screen, bright and final, like a sign announcing the end of something I had believed in my entire life. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed as the duffel bag slid to the floor. Sunlight poured through the window, mocking me with its warmth. My chest hurt, but this pain had nothing to do with surgery. It came from somewhere deeper, a place no scalpel could reach. Nurse Melissa appeared in the doorway, clipboard tucked under her arm. One look at my face, and she stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. "You look pale," she said gently. "Are you having chest pain?" I shook my head. She picked up my phone and read the messages. Her expression softened, sadness replacing professionalism. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "Family can be complicated," the nurse had said. Complicated was one way to describe it. Another was this: I had spent 45 years pouring my time, energy, and health into people who saw me as nothing more than a provider and a safety net. People who clearly found my absence more enjoyable than my presence. I looked down at the discharge paperwork spread across the hospital bed. Pages filled with medication schedules, follow-up appointments, warnings about lifting restrictions, and instructions for how to live inside my newly repaired body. Rules for my next chapter. But sitting there in that sterile room, staring at Linda's message glowing on my phone screen, those papers started to look like something else entirely. They were not just medical instructions anymore. They looked like permission, like an exit pass. Proof. Proof of 45 years spent being naive. I left Memorial Hospital on shaky legs, every step a reminder of how close I had come to dying without anyone noticing. Outside, a taxi waited at the curb. The driver was a middle-aged Hispanic man with tired eyes and a calm voice. "Rough day at the hospital, amigo?" he asked as I eased into the back seat. "Rough 45 years," I replied before I could stop myself. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror as we merged into Kansas City traffic. "Surgery?" I nodded and leaned back against the cracked vinyl seat. The discharge papers rustled in my lap, and without warning, my mind drifted to another time I had held important papers with trembling hands. 1982. Ryan was still a baby then. I was 25, broke, and full of dreams that barely fit inside our tiny apartment. I had saved for 2 full years to buy that motorcycle, a black Harley Davidson that made me feel alive the second the engine roared. But babies need cribs, not motorcycles. "The bike has to go," Linda had said, balancing Ryan on her hip. "We need money for baby furniture." I remembered polishing the chrome one last time before taping the for sale sign to it. $3,000. Freedom traded in for responsibility. I told myself it was temporary, just until things got easier. As the taxi passed a motorcycle dealership, rows of gleaming bikes lined up under the winter sky, my chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with surgery. "Family can be hard sometimes," the driver said quietly, steering toward the highway. Mine too. Another memory surfaced. 1995. Linda and I had finally started planning a honeymoon. 15 years late, but still alive in our hearts. Paris in the spring. I had been working overtime at the plant, saving every spare dollar. Then Ryan got accepted into college. "Europe will still be there," Linda had said, tears in her eyes as she tossed the travel brochures into the trash. "Our son's education comes first." 4 years of tuition payments later, Paris became just another dream folded away with the others. We passed through downtown now, glass buildings reflecting a dull January sky. I remembered driving these same streets in 2003, bone-tired after double shifts, while Linda stayed home watching daytime television. "When do I get to rest?" I had asked once, collapsing into my recliner after 16 hours on concrete floors. "When Ryan graduates and gets settled," she had promised. "Then it will be our turn." Ryan graduated. Then he needed help with rent. then a car loan, then startup money for a graphic design business that collapsed in less than 6 months. The business loan memory hit hardest. 2010. I had signed paperwork using our house as collateral while Ryan scribbled ambitious plans on napkins across from me at a diner. "This is it, Dad," he said, grinning. "6 months, and I will pay you back with interest." The business lasted 4 months. I worked 3 extra years to clean up the debt. The taxi turned onto familiar suburban streets. Past the elementary school where I coached Ryan's Little League team while shelving my own ambitions. Past the park where I once pushed Linda on the swings during our courtship, back when she looked at me like I mattered, not like a walking bank account. "You got someone meeting you?" the driver asked as we approached my neighborhood. I thought about the messages burned into my memory. "Call a taxi." "Stay another month." "It is so nice without you." "No," I said quietly. "I think I am done being picked up." The house came into view. White siding, green shutters, a lawn I had mowed every Saturday for 2 decades. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like an exhibit. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, staring at 45 years of mortgage payments, repairs, and sacrifices. All so Linda could host book club meetings and Ryan could build his gaming setup in peace. The taxi pulled away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a house that suddenly felt like evidence of the biggest mistake of my life. I walked to the front door, the keys heavy in my fingers. The house looked different now, not like home, like proof. The lock clicked softly as I stepped inside. Darkness greeted me. Even the entryway felt wrong, like I had wandered into someone else's life. I flipped on the light. Mail was piled on the small table by the door. Unopened bills, advertisements, envelopes tossed without care. Linda's shoes lay where she had kicked them off. Ryan's muddy sneakers sat beside them. No one had cleaned up after themselves for weeks. The living room was worse. Ryan's gaming equipment had taken over the space entirely, spreading across the room like a teenager's bedroom. Empty energy drink cans were stacked into a crooked pyramid on my coffee table, right where I used to read the newspaper every morning. I stood there, breathing carefully, realizing that while I had been fighting to stay alive, they had been celebrating my absence. Pizza boxes were stacked beside my recliner, the chair I had bought 15 years earlier with overtime pay from long weeks on the factory floor. They had been throwing parties. I moved slowly through the house, taking in the evidence of their comfort. My absence had not brought worry or fear. It had brought freedom. The kitchen told the same story. Dirty dishes overflowed the sink. Takeout containers filled the trash can. Inside the refrigerator sat bottles of expensive wine and cartons of premium ice cream, indulgences they had happily purchased while I was fighting to stay alive. But my home office was the deepest cut of all. They had turned it into storage. Boxes of Linda's craft supplies covered my desk, the one place that had ever truly felt like mine. Ryan's outdated computer towers and tangled cords were stacked against my bookcases. Dust coated the framed family photographs I had once arranged with care. 47 seconds. I had been clinically dead for 47 seconds, and they had converted my personal space into a closet. I lowered myself into the one chair they had not buried under clutter and closed my eyes for a moment. The combination to my safe surfaced instantly in my mind. Ryan's birthday. How fitting. The safe opened with a quiet metallic sigh. Inside sat my will, tucked neatly in its blue legal folder, exactly where I had left it months earlier. I pulled it out and read every word I had once written with such certainty. To my beloved wife, Linda Harris, I leave the family home and all personal property. To my son, Ryan Harris, I leave all financial assets, including retirement accounts, to be divided upon my death. Beloved wife, I let out a hollow laugh that echoed through the violated room. The woman who told me to stay in the hospital another month because life was better without me. The son, now 39 years old, who could not pause his television show to pick up his father after heart surgery. I stood and walked to the dusty shelves, studying the photographs. Wedding pictures showed a young couple full of hope. Baby photos of Ryan captured tiny hands and innocent smiles. Vacation snapshots documented trips I had paid for and barely enjoyed, always anxious about the cost. In every photo, I was smiling. The provider, the protector, the fool. I pulled out my phone and searched for estate attorneys in Kansas City. The screen filled with law firms and contact numbers, professionals who understood that wills were not permanent and that inheritance was earned, not owed. Mason and Keller Estate Law appeared near the top, well known for estate planning and charitable trusts. Perfect. I looked around the room one last time, at the boxes on my desk, at the dust on my memories, at the proof of my family's indifference. Then I looked down at the will in my hands. Tomorrow, I would make a call. Tomorrow, I would correct the biggest mistake of my life. That night, I barely slept. Instead, I planned, carefully, methodically. By morning, my resolve felt solid, immovable. The elevator climbed floor by floor, each number bringing me closer to something that felt like justice. 12 stories up in a downtown Kansas City office tower, Richard Mason waited with the authority to rewrite my family's future. A full week had passed since I walked back into my house and saw the truth. 7 days of research, paperwork, and preparation. During that time, I had discovered the Heart Recovery Alliance, a national nonprofit that provided housing, counseling, and financial assistance to families dealing with cardiac emergencies. People who actually valued life. The elevator doors opened to a quiet hallway lined with dark wood and polished brass. Mason and Keller was etched in gold lettering across frosted glass doors. "Mr. Harris?" the receptionist said with a professional smile. "Mr. Mason is ready for you." Richard Mason's office overlooked the city through tall windows. Law books lined the walls, interrupted by framed degrees from universities I had only ever seen on television. He was younger than I expected, early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and sharp, attentive eyes. "Please have a seat," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. "I understand you are considering major revisions to your estate plan." I sat down, resting my folder of documents on my knees. "I want everything to go to charity," I said plainly, "nothing to my family." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "That is a significant change," he said carefully. "May I ask, what led you to this decision?" I told him everything. The surgery, being gone for 47 seconds, 2 weeks in the hospital without a single call, coming home to find my family celebrating my absence. He listened without interrupting, jotting notes on a legal pad. "Mr. Harris," he said at last, "I have to ask, are you making this decision out of anger? After serious medical events, emotions can—" "I have had a week to think," I interrupted. I opened my folder and slid across medical records, bank statements, and printed messages. "This is not anger," I said. "This is clarity." He reviewed the document slowly. "You are very thorough," he admitted. "The Heart Recovery Alliance is a strong choice. They fund research, support families, and provide recovery resources." "People who value life," I said quietly, "unlike my family." "We could establish a charitable remainder trust," he suggested. "You would retain lifetime use of your home, receive a modest monthly income, and upon your passing, the remaining assets would transfer to the foundation." "That sounds perfect," I said. "I could live comfortably, knowing my family would inherit exactly what they had earned." He hesitated. "And your wife and son? Even a small bequest might reduce potential disputes." I looked him directly in the eye. "They already took everything they were entitled to," I said. "No." The word came out sharper than I meant it to, but I did not take it back. "They are adults," I continued evenly. "It is time they learned how to support themselves." Richard Mason studied me in silence for several seconds, his expression calm and measured. "Very well," he said at last. "Drafting this correctly will take about an hour. I need to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want to do?" I did not hesitate. I thought about Ryan's message. "Call a taxi. I am watching television." I thought about Linda's words. "Stay another month. It is so nice without you." I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The next hour passed in a blur of legal language, revisions, and precise formatting. Mason's assistant brought in 2 paralegals as witnesses, people who knew nothing about me beyond the fact that I was another client rewriting his will. "This document revokes all previous wills and codicils," Mason explained as he placed the papers in front of me. "Upon your death, your home and all remaining assets will transfer to the Heart Recovery Alliance. You retain lifetime residence rights and a modest monthly income." I read every page carefully, then I read them again. There was no mention of Linda, no provision for Ryan, just clean, unmistakable language that would turn decades of assumptions into a shock they would never see coming. The signing itself was almost anticlimactic. 3 signatures, 2 witnesses, 1 notary seal, 45 years of sacrifice erased with black ink on white paper. "I will notify the foundation this week," Mason said as he handed me certified copies. "They will likely want to meet with you and discuss whether you are open to a public announcement." A public announcement. I liked how that sounded. Public recognition for something that mattered. Public accountability for people who had taken me for granted. "The Heart Recovery Alliance offices are in this building," he added, 12th floor. "Their media coordinator, Rebecca Mills, is very experienced with stories like yours." I stood, sliding the certified copies safely into my jacket pocket. At the door, Mason shook my hand firmly. "You are making a generous contribution, Mr. Harris," he said. "This foundation helps hundreds of families every year." "Families who actually value life," I replied quietly, "unlike mine." The hallway felt brighter as I walked toward the elevator. Behind me was the machinery of the law. Ahead of me was something else entirely. The foundation offices were only 3 floors down. 3 floors to turn private resolve into a public message. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a bright reception area filled with posters about heart health and framed letters from grateful families. "Mr. Harris?" A woman in her 40s stepped out of a nearby office, efficient but warm, with the unmistakable confidence of someone who understood public attention. "I am Rebecca Mills, Media Coordinator," she said. "Thank you for choosing our foundation." Her office walls were lined with awards and newspaper clippings from successful campaigns. This was someone who knew how stories moved people. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing toward a chair. "Your attorney mentioned you are interested in making your donation public. Tell me what led you here." I told her everything: the heart surgery, the 47 seconds, the 2 weeks in the hospital with no calls, the text messages that shattered what I thought my family was. Rebecca listened closely, writing notes on a yellow legal pad. "This is incredibly powerful," she said when I finished. "Your story could save lives. People underestimate how critical emotional support is during cardiac recovery." "If my pain helped someone else," I said, "then it was not wasted." She picked up her phone and dialed without hesitation. "Channel 8, this is Rebecca Mills with the Heart Recovery Alliance. I have a story for you. A local man is donating his entire estate after being abandoned by his family during heart surgery." The call lasted about 10 minutes. Her eyes lit up as she spoke. "They can have a crew at your home this afternoon," she said after hanging up. "Perfect timing. Heart Disease Awareness Week begins Monday." The rest of the morning disappeared into preparation. Rebecca coached me on key points: family support, recovery realities, the Foundation's mission. But more than anything, she told me to be honest. "Do not soften it," she said. "People respond to truth. Your experience will resonate." By early afternoon, we were at the Channel 8 studio downtown. The producer, a sharp, focused woman named Allison, immediately grasped the weight of the story. "A man gives away his house after his family tells him to stay hospitalized because life is better without him?" she said, shaking her head. "Viewers are going to feel this." The studio interview went smoothly. Bright lights, professional cameras, questions I had rehearsed. The anchor, David Morales, struck the perfect balance between empathy and precision. "Mr. Harris," he asked, "what went through your mind when you read those messages from your family?" "I realize that love has to go both ways," I said calmly. "Gratitude is a choice. For 45 years, I chose my family first. When I needed them most, they chose differently. And why donate specifically to cardiac recovery and research? Because when my heart stopped for 47 seconds, strangers fought to save me," I replied. "My family did not even ask if I was alive." After the studio segment, the crew followed me home. A Channel 8 van parked in my driveway as neighbors watched from behind curtains. Cameras filmed the house that would one day belong to the Foundation. Inside, David asked more personal questions while the cameras rolled. "This is where you recovered after leaving the hospital?" he asked. "This is where I discovered the truth," I said. "They were hosting parties, ordering expensive food, using my study as storage, living comfortably while I was fighting to survive." As the lights and cameras captured every corner of that house, I understood something clearly. This was no longer just my story. It was a message. The camera slowly moved across the family photographs on the mantel, wedding portraits, Ryan's graduation day, vacation snapshots from trips I had paid for and barely enjoyed. Every image was proof of my sacrifices, silent witnesses to how completely I had given myself away. "Do you have any regrets about this decision?" the reporter asked. I looked straight into the camera. "My only regret," I said evenly, "is that it took me 68 years to understand my own worth." The crew wrapped up filming in the late afternoon. David shook my hand, his expression sincere. "This airs tonight at 6, he told me. "I expect other stations will pick it up quickly." That evening, I ate alone at a quiet restaurant downtown. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from Rebecca, coordinating social media timing and preparing the Foundation's response team. Everything was ready. At exactly 6 o'clock, I watched myself appear on the television mounted above the bar. The anchor introduced the segment with deliberate gravity. "A local man is making headlines tonight after donating his home to charity, but it is the reason behind his generosity that has people talking." My face filled the screen, calm, composed, honest. I spoke about the surgery, the abandonment, and why the Foundation mattered. The segment cut between footage of my house, my interview, and Rebecca explaining the importance of emotional support for cardiac patients. The restaurant stayed quiet, but I noticed other diners glancing from the television to me. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked angry on my behalf. My phone stayed silent. Rebecca had advised me not to check reactions yet. "Let it spread organically," she said. By morning, the story would be everywhere. As I drove home, I wondered if Linda and Ryan had seen the broadcast. They watched the evening news religiously, usually criticizing the weather or arguing with the commentators. Tonight, they would see their own words echoed back to them in front of thousands of strangers. Tonight, they would understand that the life they had taken for granted was over. I pulled into the driveway and opened the garage door. The house looked the same as it had that morning, but everything felt different. Final, settled. I turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the first time since my surgery. Later, I learned exactly how it unfolded on their end. To them, the evening news had started like any other night. Linda was flipping through magazines on the couch. Ryan was half focused on his video game, half watching the television. Pizza boxes and empty soda cans were scattered around the living room, proof of how comfortably they had settled into life without me. "Another boring day," Ryan muttered, tapping his controller. "Nothing ever happens in this town." Linda glanced up from her magazine. "At least we do not have to deal with your father worrying about every expense anymore," she said. "Remember how he used to stress over everything?" They laughed. Then the anchor's tone changed. "A local man is making headlines tonight after donating his house to charity. But it is the reason behind his generosity that has everyone talking." Ryan's controller slipped from his hands. On the screen appeared a familiar image. White siding, green shutters, the oak tree in the front yard, their house. "Mom," Ryan whispered, "that is our house." Linda dropped her magazine. They stared as the camera panned slowly across the property. Then my face appeared. "Oh my God," Linda breathed. "That is your father." They listened in stunned silence as I spoke about the surgery, about being gone for 47 seconds, about 2 weeks in the hospital without a single call. "When I asked my family to pick me up from the hospital," I said on the broadcast, "my son told me to call a taxi because he was watching television. My wife said I should stay another month because it was so nice without me." Ryan went pale. Those were his exact words. Linda covered her mouth, recognizing her own message being broadcast across the city. "This is impossible," she shouted at the screen. "He cannot do this. That is our house." The segment continued. I explained my decision to donate everything to the Heart Recovery Alliance. No inheritance, no family provisions. "Call him," Linda demanded, grabbing Ryan's arm. Call him right now." Ryan fumbled for his phone and dialed my number, straight to voicemail. "Dad, it is me," he said, his voice shaking. "We just saw the news. What are you doing? Call us back immediately." Linda snatched the phone and tried next. "Harold Harris, this is your wife. You call me back this instant. This is insane." They kept calling, again and again. After the 10th attempt, my phone stopped ringing altogether, going straight to voicemail every time. While they panicked, the story exploded online. I later saw screenshots of Ryan's social media feed. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, people who recognized the house were sharing the segment. Comments poured in, shock, anger, disbelief. And for the first time in 45 years, the silence was not mine to carry. "Look at this," Ryan said, thrusting his phone toward his mother. "Everyone is calling us monsters. They are saying we deserve this." Linda had started crying openly now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Where are we supposed to go?" she sobbed. "We do not have any money. Everything is in his name." Reality was finally sinking in. The house, the bank accounts, the retirement funds, every asset they had relied on for decades belonged to me. They had lived so comfortably for so long that they had forgotten a simple truth. They owned nothing. By 10 o'clock, they had left 67 voicemails and sent dozens of increasingly frantic text messages. I did not respond to a single one. "He has lost his mind," Ryan said, pacing the living room in tight circles. "That surgery messed up his brain. He does not know what he is doing." "Or maybe," Linda whispered, staring at her phone, "he knows exactly what he is doing. Maybe this is revenge." They spent the rest of the night trying to understand the size of the disaster they were facing. No income, no savings, no property. Ryan had never held a steady job. Linda had not worked in 3 decades. Around midnight, Ryan finally stopped pacing. "What do we do?" he asked quietly. "How do we fix this?" Linda wiped her eyes and looked around the living room, at the expensive gaming equipment, at the designer magazines, at the life they had built entirely on my effort. "We wait for him to come home," she said grimly, "and we remind him that family is family no matter what." They stationed themselves in the living room where they could see the driveway. Linda brewed coffee to stay awake. Ryan kept his phone plugged in, ready to call again. Neither of them slept. They sat there all night, watching for headlights, rehearsing apologies and arguments that might save their comfortable life. And deep down, both of them understood something had changed permanently. The man they had taken for granted for 45 years had finally stopped accepting it. By dawn, they were exhausted but alert, still rehearsing words that might undo the damage. Linda sat by the front window, her coffee cup trembling in her hands. Ryan paced behind her, phone clutched like a weapon he did not know how to use. The sound of my key turning in the lock froze them both. This was their moment, their last chance. I stepped inside at 8:30, calm and unhurried. They stood in my way, blocking the path to the kitchen, faces tight with desperation. "Dad," Ryan said, stepping forward with forced confidence, "what is this madness? We are your family." I removed my jacket slowly and hung it on the hook by the door. "Family?" I asked conversationally. "When I was in the hospital fighting for my life, did either of you call even once?" "We were busy," Linda snapped, her voice cracking with manufactured outrage. "You know how hard it is managing everything without you." "So busy," I replied evenly. That you told me to stay another month in the hospital? I looked directly at her. Because it was so good without me? Ryan's rehearsed arguments collapsed under my steady gaze. That was a joke, he said quickly. We did not mean it seriously. 67 phone calls last night, I said, walking past them toward the kitchen. Interesting how you suddenly found time when your inheritance disappeared. They followed me in a panic, voices overlapping. Dad, please listen to reason. Harold, you are not thinking clearly. The surgery affected your judgment. We love you. We always have. I filled the coffee maker with slow, deliberate movements, ignoring their pleas. When Linda grabbed my arm, I looked down at her hand with such detached calm that she immediately let go. You have 24 hours to leave this house, I said quietly. The words hit them like a physical blow. Linda staggered backward. Ryan went pale. Where will we go? Linda whispered. We do not have any money. That is no longer my concern. My complete emotional distance terrified them more than anger ever could. This was not the man who had spent decades putting their needs first. This is different, Ryan shouted. You cannot do this. I am your son. This is my home. Your home? I turned to face him fully. When was the last time you paid the mortgage? A utility bill? When did you contribute anything besides dirty dishes and demands for money? He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth left him nothing to say. Linda tried again, forcing tears to the surface. Please, she said softly. We made mistakes, but 45 years of marriage has to mean something. It did, I replied, pouring my coffee. It meant everything, until you showed me exactly how little I meant to you. We can change, she pleaded. We will be different. We will appreciate you. For how long? I asked calmly. Until the next time you need something? Until I am too old or too sick to be useful? I shook my head. I am 68 years old. I do not have time to wait for you to become decent people. I sat at the kitchen table, opened the morning newspaper, and took a sip of coffee as if they were not still standing there. The foundation will take possession next month, I said without looking up. You have until then to find somewhere else to live. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. This is our house, too. No, I said, finally looking up. It never was. Check the deed, I said calmly. Check the bank accounts. Check every legal document you can find. Everything is in my name because I earned it while you lived off my work. Morning sunlight poured through the kitchen window, illuminating the full weight of their powerlessness. For 45 years, they had assumed I would always be there, always paying, always forgiving, always absorbing the cost of their comfort. They were wrong. Linda sank into a chair, her legs finally given out as the truth settled in. Ryan stood motionless, staring at me as if watching his future vanish word by word. When I come back from my walk, I said, standing and reaching for my coat, I expect to see packing boxes. I checked my watch. 9 o'clock sharp. Dad, wait, Ryan began. 23 hours and 58 minutes, I replied without turning around. The door closed behind me with a soft, final click, leaving them alone with the ruins of the life they thought was guaranteed. Outside, I walked down the same street I had called home for 20 years. With every step, my chest felt lighter, freer. Through the kitchen window, I could still see them frozen in stunned silence. Justice, I realized, had a surprisingly peaceful feeling. When I returned from my walk, packing boxes were already stacked by the front door. They had believed me. Through the living room window, I saw Linda frantically wrapping dishes in old newspapers while Ryan made repeated trips to his car, hauling out his gaming equipment piece by piece. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and settled into the rocking chair on the front porch, positioning myself where I could clearly see their frantic activity. The morning air was crisp and clear, perfect weather for a new beginning. "Dad, this is your last chance," Ryan called out as he struggled with a bulky computer monitor. "We can fix this." "You had 45 years of chances," I replied without looking up from the newspaper. Linda appeared in the doorway, hair unkempt, eyes swollen from crying. "Harold, please," she said softly. "I am sorry about that message. I was not thinking clearly." "That," I said evenly, "has always been the problem. You never thought about anyone but yourself." Inside, the packing had descended into chaos. Decades of accumulated possessions, and less than 24 hours to decide what mattered. Linda kept running back inside for one more essential item. Ryan argued with himself about whether old video games were worth the remaining trunk space. Around noon, Mrs. Caldwell from next door wandered over, curiosity written all over her face. "Everything all right?" she asked gently, glancing at the boxes and the frantic movement. "Just some family changes," I said pleasantly. "Nothing to worry about." She nodded, but her knowing look told me she had probably seen the news. By now, the entire neighborhood likely had. Throughout the afternoon, Ryan tried every approach he could think of. First, anger. "This is insane. You cannot survive without us." Then bargaining. "What if we paid rent? What if we helped with expenses?" Finally, desperation. "Dad, where are we supposed to go? Mom has not worked in 30 years. "I have lived 68 years, I replied calmly. "I think I will manage." Linda cycled through her familiar arsenal. Tears, health worries, references to our vows. Carefully selected memories meant to soften me. None of it worked. I had seen this performance too many times before. By 4 o'clock, both cars were packed past capacity. Clothes and belongings were stuffed into every available corner. Furniture, appliances, and boxes of forgotten things were left behind, abandoned just as easily as I once had been. "We will be back," Ryan said as he slammed the trunk shut. "You cannot keep us away forever." "You are welcome to visit," I said evenly, "after you call first and ask permission." Linda stood by her car, keys dangling from her fingers, staring at the house she had lived in for 2 decades. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I never thought it would end like this," she whispered. "Neither did I replied honestly. "I thought you would learn to appreciate what you had." At exactly 6 o'clock, 24 hours after my ultimatum, both cars pulled out of the driveway. Linda was crying. Ryan looked furious, but they were gone. I stayed on the porch until dusk, watching the sun sink behind the quiet houses on the street. For the first time in 45 years, I was completely alone, and the silence was beautiful. Inside, the house felt enormous. My footsteps echoed through empty rooms. No television blaring, no arguments about money, no constant demands. I walked into my study and opened the desk drawer where I had hidden travel brochures for 20 years. Mountain ranges in Colorado, desert highways in Arizona, national parks I had dreamed about but never allowed myself to see. The brochures had sat untouched for 2 decades. Now, for the first time, I opened them without guilt. February passed quietly as I learned how to live with solitude, planning my first real journey since long before my marriage. I finally had something I had never been allowed to keep before. Time. March marked my first real adventure. I drove down to Big Bend National Park in Texas, something I had talked about for years but never allowed myself to do. I had never camped alone. I had never taken a trip simply because I wanted to. The desert stunned me. Endless sky stretched in every direction. Ancient rock formations rose out of the earth like monuments. The silence was so complete, it felt sacred, the kind of quiet that reaches inside you and rearranges things. One evening, while sitting by a small campfire, I met Tom, a retired high school teacher from Oklahoma. He noticed my spotless, brand-new camping gear and smiled. "First time out here?" he asked. "First time anywhere, really," I admitted. "I am 68 years old, and this is my first trip just for pleasure." Tom laughed, the kind of warm, knowing laugh that comes from lived experience. "Well, son," he said, "it is never too late to finally start living for yourself." April took me north to Colorado. By then, I had upgraded my equipment and felt confident navigating winding mountain roads. The thin air tested my healing heart, but slow hikes through pine forests filled me with a kind of energy I had not felt in years. That month, I discovered photography. I bought my first serious camera in decades, and the mountains demanded to be captured. Snow-covered peaks reflected in glassy lakes. Wildflowers spilled across high meadows. Sunrises turned granite cliffs into gold. For the first time, I was not just seeing beauty, I was preserving it. In May, I gained something even more valuable than landscapes. Sarah. She was a widow from Denver who taught advanced photography techniques in a senior hiking group. We spent hours discussing lighting, framing, and composition while walking trails at elevations my cardiologist would have forbidden 6 months earlier. During my next checkup, Dr. Reynolds studied my charts, then looked up at me with surprise. "You are glowing," she said. "Your recovery is remarkable. What changed?" "Everything," I told her honestly. "I finally started living for myself." Throughout the spring, my involvement with the Heart Recovery Alliance deepened. Rebecca featured my travel photos in their newsletters, showing other cardiac patients that life after surgery could be about exploration, not just survival. "Your story has already helped dozens of families," Rebecca told me over coffee in June. "They learned to value each other while they still can." My favorite moments, though, were spent talking directly with patients facing surgery. Men and women terrified of the unknown, sitting alone in the hospital rooms. I shared not just medical facts, but what I had learned about dignity. "Family support matters," I would tell them, "but self-respect matters even more." Summer opened the world wider. Arizona's deserts bloomed with unexpected color. Utah's red rock formations pushed my photography skills to their limits. New Mexico's ancient ruins reminded me how small one lifetime really is. At 68, I was healthier than I had been at 58. Regular hiking, fresh air, low stress, and purpose-driven days reshaped my body as much as my mind. Tom and Sarah became regular travel companions. We met at parks across the Southwest, shared campsites, explored trails together. For the first time in my adult life, I had friendships built on shared interests, not obligation. "You are a completely different person," Sarah said one evening as we watched the sun set over Zion. "What were you like before all this?" "Tired," I replied simply. "Very tired." Rebecca's media team shared my journey online. Photos of an older man discovering joy, stories about delayed dreams finally being chased. Messages poured in from across the country. Heart patients recognized themselves. Adult children admitted uncomfortable truths. Spouses acknowledged how easy it is to take devotion for granted. By late July, I returned to Overland Park not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The house felt different now, not like a burden, like a refuge. One afternoon, I sat in my favorite coffee shop downtown, reviewing photos from Colorado. As I adjusted the screen on my camera, a shadow fell across my table. I looked up. Ryan stood there, hesitant. He looked different, cleaner, straighter, more grounded. His usual gaming clothes had been replaced with pressed slacks and a button-down shirt. His posture belonged to someone who had learned responsibility the hard way. "Dad," he asked quietly, "could I sit down for a minute?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me, studying him. 6 months had passed since he left my house, and he looked like he had aged 5 years in the best possible way. "You look good," he said, sitting down. "Travel suits you?" "It does," I replied. "How are things, Ryan?" "Different," he said, choosing his words carefully. "I got a full-time job, advertising agency downtown, designing marketing materials." I nodded and waited. "I rented a small apartment, too," he continued. "Nothing fancy, but it is mine. I pay the rent, buy my groceries, do my own laundry." "That is good," I said. "I am glad to hear it." He pulled out his phone and showed me pictures. A modest studio apartment. Clean, organized, sparse, but intentional. "And your mother?" I asked. "How is she managing?" "She is learning," he said quietly. "Got a job as a sales associate at a department store. Has her own place now." He looked down at his hands. "We do not see each other much. Both too busy working." I sipped my coffee, studying this unfamiliar version of my son, realizing that the distance had done what 45 years of sacrifice never could. It had made him grow. The entitlement I had known my whole life was gone. In its place was something quieter, something closer to humility. "Dad," Ryan said suddenly, looking me straight in the eye, "I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking to move back in. I am not asking for money. And I am not asking you to change your will." That caught me off guard. "Then what are you asking for?" I asked. "A chance," he said carefully. "A chance to prove that I have changed. Maybe we could get coffee sometimes. Like this? Only if you want to." I turned my tablet toward him and showed him a few photographs from Colorado. Mountain lakes at sunrise, trails winding through pine forests, a self-portrait of me standing under a sky full of stars. His reaction was unguarded, genuine. "I never knew you wanted to do any of this," he said quietly. "I never knew either," I replied. "I never had the space to find out." Ryan nodded slowly. "I have been thinking about that a lot. About how much of your life you gave up for us. How easily we took it for granted." I showed him a recent Heart Recovery Alliance newsletter featuring my story and my photos, explaining how the foundation used them to help other families understand what support really means. "So we are a warning now?" he asked with a small, uneasy smile. "We are a lesson," I said, "for everyone involved." We talked for another hour. Ryan told me about his job, tight deadlines, difficult clients, the pride that came with earning his own paycheck and paying his own bills. He asked real questions about my travels, about where I had been and where I wanted to go next. As we stood to leave, he hesitated. "I understand if you do not want a relationship," he said honestly. I understand if trust takes time. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what we did to you, how wrong it was. We walked together to the parking lot. His car was an older sedan, nothing impressive, but clean and well cared for. Proof of responsibility in small details. "Ryan," I said as he reached for the door, "maybe we could do this again in a month or so." His smile was careful but hopeful. "I would like that." "No promises beyond that," I added. "I am not changing my will. I am not rebuilding the old relationship. But maybe we can build something new, something healthier." "I understand," he said. "And Dad, I am glad you are happy." I watched him drive away, noticing how he checked his mirrors, used his signals, paid attention. Small things, but meaningful ones. The afternoon sun felt warm on my shoulders as I walked to my own car. Tomorrow, I was heading to Arkansas to explore the Ozark Mountains. Next month, perhaps Maine for autumn photography. My phone buzzed. Tom had texted. "Sarah found an incredible campsite in Utah for October. Interested?" I typed back without hesitation. "Absolutely. Send the details." 6 months earlier, I had been a dying man ignored by his own family. Now I was healthy, purposeful, and surrounded by people who chose to be in my life, not because they had to, but because they wanted to be. That difference, I had learned, was everything. I drove home through Arlington's familiar streets, past the coffee shop where Ryan and I had shared an honest conversation, past my neighbor's house, where she waved from her garden, past the Heart Recovery Alliance office, where Rebecca was already planning the next awareness campaign, home to a house that was finally mine, home to a life I was building one deliberate choice at a time. Some stories end with dramatic reunions or sweeping forgiveness. Mine ended with something better: self-respect, peace, and the quiet knowledge that any love going forward would grow from choice, not obligation. As I pulled into my driveway, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in the same colors I had captured in Colorado, beautiful, calm, and completely my own.